It started with the smell of fresh paint and the rhythmic noise of hammers echoing through the house, a sound that once symbolized the excitement of new beginnings. For weeks, I had thrown myself into this renovation project, convinced it was just what our marriage needed. A fresh coat of paint, new floors, updated cabinets. It felt like a metaphor for starting over, for fixing what had started to feel broken between us. But I never imagined that the renovation would reveal a crack so deep that no amount of patching could repair it. The discovery came on a Tuesday afternoon. The contractors had wrapped up early, leaving me alone in the chaos of half-sanded floors and dust-covered furniture. Our old Victorian house had always held its share of quirks, hidden nooks, uneven walls, creaky floorboards. But this was something else entirely. I was rearranging boxes in the storage room, trying to clear space for the new built-ins we had ordered, when my hand brushed against an uneven panel on the wall. At first, I thought it was just shoddy craftsmanship. But as I pressed harder, the panel shifted. A gap appeared, revealing a small, dark opening. My curiosity overpowered my sense of hesitation. Pulling the panel further, I found myself staring into what could only be described as a secret room, a narrow, hidden space between walls. The air inside was stale, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years, and yet there was an unsettling sense of presence, as though this room had been waiting to be discovered. At first, I thought it might be storage. Shelves lined the walls, and boxes sat stacked neatly in the corner. But as I stepped inside, the truth began to unfold. The first thing I noticed was the photographs. Dozens of them, pinned to a corkboard, their edges curling with age. They weren't just any photographs, they were of a woman. She was striking, with dark hair that framed her face in waves, her smile radiant and unguarded. And standing beside her in nearly every shot was my husband. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers trembled as I reached out to touch one of the photos, as though the physical act might make it less real. But the image remained. It was unmistakable. The way he looked at her, soft, adoring, almost reverent. It was a look I hadn't seen in years. My chest tightened as I turned my attention to the shelves. There were letters, tied together with ribbon, the handwriting unmistakably his. My hands shook as I picked up one of the envelopes and slid the paper free. "My dearest Evelyn," it began. Evelyn. The name hit me like a slap. I had never heard him speak it, yet here it was, inked on page after page. The letters were love notes, confessions of desire and longing. They spoke of secret rendezvous, shared dreams, and a future they seemed to imagine together. Among the letters were small tokens, trinkets that must have meant something to them. A delicate bracelet, a pressed flower, a ticket stub from some concert they had attended. Each one was like a nail driven deeper into my chest. And then there was the journal. It lay at the bottom of one of the boxes, its leather cover worn and creased. I opened it, my hands now numb, and began to read. The entries were detailed, chronicling their time together. They had met 5 years ago. 5. All this time, while I thought we were building a life, he had been building something else with her. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, the journal still clutched in my hands. My vision blurred with tears, and a deep, guttural sob escaped me. It was as though my entire world had been rewritten in an instant. I had to know more. Who was Evelyn? Was she still in his life? Did he love her more than he loved me? Or was this affair, this betrayal, just another compartmentalized part of him, hidden away like this room? When he came home that evening, I was waiting. The evidence was laid out on the dining table. Letters, photographs, the journal. I watched as his face drained of color, his eyes widening in panic. "Laura," he began, his voice unsteady. "I can explain." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Explain? Explain this." I gestured to the table. "Explain the years of lies? The double life? Tell me, was she worth it? Did she make you happier than I ever could?" He stumbled over his words, offering excuses that only deepened my fury. "It was a mistake," he said. "It ended years ago. I didn't know how to get rid of all of it." "Years ago?" I hissed. "Then why keep it? Why hide it like some twisted shrine?" He had no answer. His silence spoke louder than any justification could. Over the next few days, the house grew colder. We moved like strangers, the weight of the discovery hanging between us. But I couldn't let it go. I needed to understand the full scope of his betrayal. I started digging, piecing together timelines, searching for any trace of her. And I found her. Evelyn was still in town, her life seemingly untouched by the chaos she had left in mine. She ran a small boutique on the edge of the city, her face just as striking in person as it was in the photographs. I confronted her one rainy afternoon, stepping into her shop with a mix of anger and desperation. She recognized me immediately, her expression shifting from curiosity to guilt. "Laura," she said softly, as though she had rehearsed this moment. "You knew," I said, my voice trembling. "You knew he was married." She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at me with something that resembled pity. "I ended it," she said. "A long time ago. I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, you did," I snapped. "You both did." The conversation left me feeling emptier than before. There was no closure, no satisfying resolution. Just more questions and the bitter reality that the life I thought I had was built on lies. The secret room has been sealed now, the panel nailed shut. But the wounds it revealed remain open, raw and unhealed. Every day, I wonder if I can ever truly forgive him, or if this house, this marriage, will forever be haunted by the ghost of Evelyn. The days following my discovery blurred into a haze of anger, sorrow, and unbearable silence. I didn't know how to move forward, if there even was a forward. Every glance at my husband brought a fresh wave of nausea. Every corner of the house felt tainted, as though Evelyn's presence had seeped into the walls, clinging to the air we breathed. I couldn't sleep. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction I'd ever had with him, searching for clues I might have missed. Was it the late nights at work? The sudden trips? The way he sometimes seemed distant, even when he was sitting right next to me? How had I been so blind? One night, unable to bear the oppressive quiet, I got up and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat in the dimly lit kitchen, staring out the window at the darkened backyard, and let the questions flood in. Why had he kept the room? Why hadn't he destroyed everything when it ended? Did he still love her? Was there a part of him that wished he had chosen her instead of me? I didn't realize he'd come downstairs until I heard his voice behind me. "You're up late." I didn't look at him. Couldn't sleep. He hesitated, lingering in the doorway. "Laura, we need to talk." I laughed bitterly, swirling the wine in my glass. "Talk? Now you want to talk? After years of lying to me, now you suddenly feel like sharing?" He stepped closer, his hands shoved into his pockets. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. Hurt me." I snapped, turning to face him. "You didn't just hurt me, Tom. You destroyed me. You destroyed us." His face crumpled, but I didn't care. I was too angry, too raw to stop. "Do you have any idea what it feels like to find out your husband had an entire other life? That he gave a part of himself to someone else, someone who isn't me?" "I ended it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't real, Laura. What we have, that's real." I don't even know anymore. "A mistake. A stupid, selfish mistake." 5 years isn't a mistake, I shot back. It's a choice. Over and over again, you chose her. You chose to lie to me, to betray me. Don't stand there and try to minimize it. He sank into the chair across from me, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know how to fix this." I stared at him, my heart aching despite my anger. "I don't think you can." The days turned into weeks, and still, the wound festered. I tried to distract myself with work, with friends, with anything that might dull the pain, but nothing worked. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. I heard her name. I relived the moment I found that room, over and over again. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of her shop again. I hadn't planned to go. I'd just gotten into my car and driven, letting my instincts guide me. But there I was, staring at the sign above the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Before I could talk myself out of it, I stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up from behind the counter. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Laura," she said, her voice cautious. "I didn't expect to see you again. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I need answers." She nodded, as though she'd been expecting this. "Come in the back. We can talk privately." I followed her into a small office cluttered with papers and fabric samples. She gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, my arms crossed over my chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded. "If you ended it, if you felt so bad about it, why didn't you come clean?" She sighed, sinking into the chair behind her desk. "I thought about it. 100 times I thought about it, but I knew it wouldn't help. What would it change? It wouldn't erase what happened. It wouldn't make it any easier for you." "Easier?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Do you have any idea what it's like to find out this way? To stumble on this secret room and realize your entire life is a lie?" She looked down at her hands, silent. "Did you love him?" I pressed. Her head snapped up, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that looked like pain. "Yes," she admitted. "I did. But it wasn't enough. He didn't love me the way he loves you." I laughed bitterly. "And how would you know how he loves me?" "Because he never left you," she said quietly. "No matter how much I wanted him to." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know if they were meant to comfort me or cut me deeper. Either way, they stayed with me long after I left her shop. Tom and I continued to drift through our days, our conversations stilted and awkward. I avoided him as much as possible, retreating into myself. But the more I tried to shut him out, the more he seemed determined to break through. One evening, as I was folding laundry, he came into the room and sat down beside me. "I'm not giving up on us," he said. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll do whatever it takes to earn it." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I kept folding, my hands moving mechanically. "I love you," he said, his voice breaking. "I've always loved you." The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. I dropped the shirt I was holding and buried my face in my hands. He wrapped his arms around me, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't push him away. But even as I let him hold me, a part of me wondered if love would ever be enough to heal the damage he'd done. Could I forgive him? Could I learn to trust him again? Or would Evelyn's shadow always linger between us, a reminder of the life he'd kept hidden? I didn't know. All I knew was that the road ahead would be long, and the answers wouldn't come easily. But for now, I was willing to try. In the days that followed, we began a fragile, tentative dance around each other, trying to make sense of what was left of our marriage. There were moments of raw emotion, nights when we stayed up late talking or arguing about everything. He answered every question I threw at him, no matter how painful. Where did they meet? How often did they see each other? Did he ever imagine a future with her? The answers hurt, each one like peeling off a layer of skin, but I needed them. I needed the truth, no matter how much it cut me. He admitted that their relationship had started during a rough patch in our marriage. We'd been distant, preoccupied with our jobs, barely communicating. She had been a client, someone who made him feel seen, desired. "It wasn't about you," he kept insisting. "It was about me, my insecurities, my failures." But wasn't it always about that? I wanted to scream. About someone else's selfishness? Someone else's need to fill a void? Despite his willingness to talk, I couldn't stop questioning everything. Every look, every word, every memory felt suspect. I began obsessing over the details. If I could just piece together the full timeline, maybe I could make sense of it. Maybe I could understand why he had done this, and whether it was something I could forgive. One day, while he was at work, I returned to the sealed room. I stood there for a long time, staring at the panel we had nailed shut. My heart raced as I pried it open again, unable to resist the pull of the past. The stale air hit me, and I stepped inside, careful not to disturb anything. This time, I looked closer at the photos. There were candid shots of Evelyn laughing, her hair catching the sunlight. Pictures of them at a lake, her hand resting casually on his arm. It was clear that they had shared a world of their own, one I had never been a part of. A world that existed parallel to mine. In one box, I found a small envelope marked E. Inside was a pressed flower, a white daisy. Attached was a note in her handwriting. For every moment you've made me smile. The simplicity of it made my stomach churn. It was intimate, personal. And worse, it wasn't some grand, fleeting fling. It was love. A quiet, enduring love that had thrived in the shadows. I left the room feeling more broken than ever. That night, I confronted him again, unable to hold back the torrent of emotions bubbling inside me. "Why didn't you destroy it?" I demanded. "The letters, the pictures. Why keep them if it was over?" He looked at me, his face pale and drawn. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe a part of me couldn't let go. Not because I still wanted her, but because I was ashamed. It was easier to hide it than to face it. To face you. That's not good enough," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't get to keep souvenirs of your betrayal and call it shame. You don't get to hide pieces of your life from me." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I'm trying, Laura," he said quietly. "I'm trying to fix this." But how do you fix something so deeply broken? How do you erase years of lies? I didn't have an answer, and neither did he. In the weeks that followed, I tried therapy. At first, I went alone, pouring my heart out to a stranger who listened with kind, non-judgmental eyes. She helped me unpack my emotions, helped me understand that my pain, my anger, were valid. But she also pushed me to decide what I wanted, to stay or to leave. Leaving seemed like the obvious choice. But every time I imagined packing my bags, walking out the door, I hesitated. We had built a life together, a history. Could I really throw it all away? Eventually, Tom joined me in therapy. Our sessions were tense, full of tears and recriminations. He owned up to his mistakes, admitted how deeply he had hurt me, but he also fought for us. "I don't want to lose you," he said over and over again. "I'll do whatever it takes." But his words weren't enough. Trust isn't something you can rebuild with promises alone. It takes time, effort, consistency. And even then, it's fragile, easily shattered. One night, as I lay in bed, staring at the empty space beside me where he had slept before moving to the guest room, I realized something. I wasn't just grieving his betrayal. I was grieving the version of our marriage I had thought we had. The love I had believed was unbreakable. That realization didn't make it easier, but it gave me clarity. I needed to let go of the past if I was ever going to move forward, whether with him or without him. Underscore, 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 underscore. Months passed, and slowly, things began to shift. We worked on us, brick by painstaking brick. He was patient, willing to endure my outbursts, my tears, my endless questions. He gave me access to everything: his phone, his email, his schedule. There were no more secrets, no more hidden rooms. I, too, made changes. I started focusing on myself, on rediscovering who I was outside of being his wife. I took up yoga, joined a book club, even started painting, a hobby I hadn't indulged in since college. It was freeing, finding pieces of myself I had forgotten existed. There were setbacks, of course. Nights when I doubted him, when the images of him with Evelyn crept into my mind like ghosts. Days when the weight of it all felt unbearable. But there were also moments of connection, glimpses of the man I had fallen in love with. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive him. Some scars run too deep to fade entirely. But I've come to accept that healing isn't linear. It's messy and complicated, full of detours and setbacks. As for the room, it remains sealed. A relic of the past, a reminder of what was almost lost. Sometimes, I stand in front of it and think about the version of myself who found it that day, the woman who thought her world had ended. In a way, she was right. That version of my life did end. But from its ashes, I've begun to build something new. Whether it will last, whether it will be enough, only time will tell. For now, I take it one day at a time. One step forward, no matter how small. As the season shifted, so did the rhythm of my days. Winter bled into spring, and with it came a cautious sense of renewal. The house, once a battlefield of emotions, started to feel less suffocating. The renovations were finally complete, a project I had considered abandoning more than once, but the fresh walls and polished floors felt symbolic, like a new foundation we were trying to build, however fragile it might be. Yet, the shadows of the past lingered. The hidden room haunted me, not in the sense of fear, but in its persistent, nagging reminder of what I'd uncovered. Sometimes, when I walked past the sealed panel, I could almost hear the echoes of my heartbreak, the creak of the door opening, the crackle of aged paper, the whisper of her name in my mind. It would never leave me completely, I realized. It was a scar, permanent and undeniable, etched into the framework of our marriage. Tom remained steadfast in his efforts to rebuild. He was patient with my questions, even the ones I repeated endlessly, as though hearing his answers over and over might change something. He quit his job, an act that stunned me, and took a position that kept him closer to home. I needed a clean slate, he explained one night, as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Too many memories tied to that place. Too many opportunities to fall into old habits. I didn't know whether to be grateful or suspicious. Was it guilt driving him, or genuine remorse? Was he trying to prove his devotion, or was he simply running from the mess he'd made? I didn't have the answers, and I wasn't sure I wanted them. All I knew was that his actions, for now, seemed to match his words. But forgiveness, I discovered, wasn't a switch I could flip. It wasn't something I could grant with a single act or declaration. It was a process, a slow, grueling one, and some days I wasn't sure I'd ever get there. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, I came across our wedding album. I hadn't seen it in years, hadn't felt the need to revisit those photos, but something compelled me to open it. There we were, frozen in time, young, wide-eyed, and utterly in love. His smile was radiant, his arm wrapped tightly around me, as though he couldn't imagine a world where we weren't together. My heart ached as I traced the edges of the photos, remembering the promises we had made that day. For better or worse. This was worse, wasn't it? The worst thing I could have imagined. And yet, here we were, still standing, still trying. Wasn't that worth something? I brought the album downstairs that evening and set it on the dining table. Tom noticed it immediately, his expression softening as he flipped through the pages. "You were so beautiful that day," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. I wanted to say, "And you were so faithful," but I bit my tongue. Instead, I nodded, watching as he lingered on a photo of us dancing, my head resting against his chest. "Do you ever think about what it meant?" I asked suddenly. "The vows? Did they mean anything to you back then?" His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw the man I had married. Not the man who had betrayed me, but the one who had held my hand through life's challenges, who had laughed with me, dreamed with me. "They meant everything," he said quietly. "They still do. I failed you, Laura. I failed us. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a second." His words, while heartfelt, felt fragile. Love alone wasn't enough to erase what had happened. But it was a start. Underscore, 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 underscore. Months turned into a year, and the rawness of my pain began to dull, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. Therapy became a lifeline, a space where I could untangle my emotions without the pressure of immediacy. Tom continued to show up, week after week, never missing a session, never shirking responsibility for the choices he'd made. We began to rediscover each other in small, unexpected ways. A walk in the park turned into an afternoon of laughter, our conversations light and easy for the first time in ages. A shared bottle of wine on a Friday night led to a quiet dance in the living room, the music filling the space where words weren't enough. But the doubts never fully disappeared. They lingered in the corners of my mind, whispering questions I couldn't ignore. Could I trust him again? Would I ever feel truly secure in our marriage? Or was I simply delaying the inevitable, prolonging a relationship that had been irreparably damaged? One evening, as we sat by the fire, Tom turned to me, his expression unusually serious. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady, "about us. About everything. I want to renew our vows." His words took me by surprise. "What?" "Not right away," he added quickly. "I know we're not there yet. But someday, when you're ready, I want to stand in front of you again and promise to be the man you deserve. To prove to you that I'm all in. For the rest of my life." The idea felt overwhelming, almost absurd. How could we make new promises when the old ones had been shattered? But there was something in his eyes, a sincerity that gave me pause. "I'll think about it," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. And I did. For weeks, I turned the idea over in my mind, weighing the possibilities. It wasn't just about him proving himself to me. It was about me deciding whether I could truly let go of the past, whether I could open myself up to the risk of being hurt again. Underscore, 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 underscore. The day we renewed our vows, the air was crisp and cool, the sky painted with streaks of orange and gold. It was a small ceremony, just the two of us in a quiet garden behind the church. I wore a simple dress, nothing like the elaborate gown from our first wedding, and he stood before me in a navy suit, his hands trembling slightly as he held mine. "I can't undo the mistakes I've made," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I can promise to spend the rest of my life making it up to you, to love you, to honor you, and to never take you for granted again." When it was my turn, the words didn't come easily. My voice wavered, and I had to pause to steady myself. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forget," I admitted. "But I'm learning to forgive. And I promise to keep trying. To keep choosing you, even when it's hard. Because despite everything, I still love you. And I still believe in us." As we exchanged rings, I felt a cautious sense of hope. This wasn't a fairy tale, and it never would be. Our marriage would always bear the scars of what had happened. But scars are a sign of healing, aren't they? A reminder that even after the deepest wounds, life goes on. For better or worse, I was choosing to believe in the possibility of something new. Something stronger. Something worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we might make it. Life after the renewal of our vows wasn't a fairy tale. There were no magical moments where everything suddenly clicked back into place. Healing remained a messy, nonlinear process, with days that felt like progress and others that dragged me backward into the depths of doubt and resentment. But there was also a quiet determination that grew between us, an unspoken agreement to keep trying, no matter how hard it got. Tom worked tirelessly to prove himself. He became more present, more attentive, in ways that felt almost foreign after so many years of him being distracted or distant. He took up cooking, a hobby he'd never shown interest in before, and insisted on preparing dinner most nights. It wasn't about the meals themselves, though I appreciated them. It was about the effort, the way he poured himself into small, tangible acts of care. I noticed other changes, too. He volunteered to take on more of the mental load, handling bills, scheduling appointments, remembering birthdays and anniversaries. It was as if he wanted to shoulder every burden, to show me that he could be the partner I needed. I let him, partly out of exhaustion, partly because I wanted to see if he'd follow through. And he did. Despite his efforts, the shadows of Evelyn's presence still lingered. She had moved on, or so I believed, but her ghost remained embedded in our story. I wondered sometimes if she thought about him, if she regretted letting him go. Did she imagine us together, trying to rebuild, or did she consider herself the victor in some unspoken competition, the woman who had forced my husband to reveal his truest, most flawed self? In my darkest moments, I still found myself drawn to that secret room. Though it had been sealed, I could never fully shut it out of my mind. I would stand in front of the panel, my fingers grazing the smooth surface, and wonder if the memories hidden inside had truly been buried, or if they were merely waiting to resurface. One day, I found myself staring at the panel for what felt like hours, lost in thought. Tom caught me there, his expression unreadable. "Why do you keep coming back here?" he asked gently. I hesitated, unsure how to explain the pull it had over me. "Because it's a part of us now," I said finally. "No matter how much I want to forget, it's always there. It changed everything." He stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "Then let's do something about it." "What do you mean?" "Let's turn it into something else," he said. "Something that belongs to us, not to her, not to the past." I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "You think we can just repaint it and pretend it's new?" "No," he said firmly. "I don't mean pretending. I mean reclaiming it, taking that pain and turning it into something that makes us stronger." His words stayed with me, and over the next few weeks, we started brainstorming. The room was small and narrow, more a passageway than a proper space, but it had potential. With some effort, we transformed it into a reading nook, lined with shelves, filled with books we both loved. A cozy armchair sat by the window, and a soft lamp cast a warm glow in the evenings. It became a place where we could sit together, talk, or simply enjoy the quiet. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about rewriting it one piece at a time. Underscore, 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 underscore. As the years passed, the rawness of what had happened began to fade, replaced by a cautious sense of peace. Trust didn't return all at once. It came in small, gradual moments. A day when he stayed late at work and I didn't spiral into suspicion. A weekend trip when I didn't feel the need to check his phone. Slowly, I learned to breathe again, to let go of the constant fear of being blindsided. We still went to therapy, though less frequently than before. Our therapist encouraged us to celebrate the progress we'd made, no matter how small it seemed. "Rebuilding isn't about perfection," she reminded us. "It's about persistence, about showing up every day, even when it's hard." There were still hard days, of course. Days when the memories resurfaced, sharp and painful, like glass shards hidden in the sand. But they became less frequent, and when they did come, we faced them together. He no longer shied away from my pain, and I no longer lashed out with the same bitterness. We had learned, in our own imperfect way, to hold space for each other. Underscore, 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 underscore. A few years later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. I was sitting in our little reading nook, a cup of coffee warming my hands, while Tom tinkered in the kitchen. The house was filled with the comforting hum of life, birds chirping outside, the faint clatter of dishes, the soft rustle of pages as I turned them. It struck me then how far we had come. The woman I had been on that fateful day, standing in the hidden room, clutching those letters, felt like a distant memory. She was still part of me, of course, but she no longer defined me. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, becoming something I could live with. More importantly, it had taught me lessons I hadn't expected, about resilience, about vulnerability, about the messy, complicated nature of love. Tom appeared in the doorway, a sheepish smile on his face. "Pancakes are ready. But, I might have burned the first batch." I laughed, setting my book aside. "I guess I'll have to supervise next time." As I followed him into the kitchen, I realized that I no longer felt like a victim of his betrayal. I had reclaimed my life, my voice, my sense of self. And though the journey had been painful, it had also been transformative. We had taken something broken and built something new, something flawed but enduring. It wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. As life settled into its new rhythm, I began to understand the profound truth of what healing really meant. It wasn't a destination, some far-off point where everything would suddenly be perfect again. It was a journey, an ongoing process of facing the pain, accepting it, and learning how to live with it. Tom and I had come far, but there were still unspoken moments of tension, subtle undercurrents that reminded me of the scars we carried. I could see it in the way he paused before answering questions about his past, the way his gaze lingered on me as if trying to gauge my mood. I could feel it in myself, too, the way my stomach tightened whenever his phone buzzed unexpectedly, even though I no longer had reason to suspect anything. But those moments, while uncomfortable, became less frequent. They no longer defined us. Instead, we focused on rebuilding our connection brick by brick. We found small ways to reconnect, watching old movies together on rainy nights, taking long walks around the neighborhood, sharing little victories from our day. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but it was real. And for me, that was enough. Underscore, 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 underscore. A pivotal moment came 2 years after the discovery of the secret room. It was a warm summer evening, and we had invited friends over for a barbecue, a rare occurrence, as we had kept to ourselves for so long. I was in the kitchen, preparing a salad, when one of my closest friends, Emily, leaned against the counter and gave me a knowing look. "You seem lighter," she said, her tone curious but kind. "Happier." I wasn't sure I'd ever see that again. I paused, her words sinking in. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding my breath, waiting for someone to notice the change. "It's been a long road," I admitted. "But yeah, I think I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." She hesitated before speaking again, her voice lowering. "Can I ask you something? About Tom?" I nodded, bracing myself. "How did you forgive him?" "I mean, I don't know if I could have done it. What he did, it was huge." Her question hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to answer. Forgiveness had never been a single moment for me. It was a series of choices, made over and over again. "I didn't forgive him all at once," I said finally. "And honestly, I'm not sure I ever fully will. But I decided that the life we've built together was worth fighting for. That doesn't mean I forgot what happened. It just means I chose to keep trying." She nodded thoughtfully, her gaze softening. "You're stronger than you think, Laura." Her words stayed with me long after the party ended. Was it strength that had kept me here? Or fear? Or perhaps something deeper, a stubborn hope that love, even when fractured, could still be salvaged? Underscore, 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 underscore. That fall, Tom surprised me with a trip to the mountains. We hadn't taken a vacation in years, and the thought of getting away, just the two of us, felt both exciting and nerve-wracking. He planned every detail, from the cozy cabin we stayed in to the scenic hikes we ventured on. One afternoon, as we sat on a rocky overlook, watching the sun dip behind the peaks, he turned to me with a look of quiet determination. "I've been thinking a lot about what we've been through," he said, "and about the kind of man I want to be. For you, for us." I didn't respond right away, letting his words settle. The vulnerability in his voice was unmistakable, and it touched something deep inside me. "You've changed," I said finally. "I can see it, and I appreciate it. But I also need you to understand that I'm still healing too. This isn't just about you proving yourself. It's about me finding a way to trust again." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I know, and I'll wait as long as it takes." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. There was no trace of the man who had kept secrets, who had hidden parts of himself from me. In his place was someone who had been stripped bare by his mistakes and was trying, piece by piece, to rebuild himself into someone better. Underscore, 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 underscore. The years that followed were a mix of ordinary joys and subtle challenges. We celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, and holidays with a renewed sense of gratitude. We had hard conversations when old wounds resurfaced, but we faced them together instead of letting them fester. We leaned on each other in ways we never had before, and slowly, our marriage became something new, different from what it had been, but not necessarily worse. One of the biggest milestones came when we decided to revisit the idea of starting a family. It was a topic we had avoided during the worst of our struggles, both of us unsure if we were ready to take that step. But as time passed, the idea began to feel less daunting and more like a natural progression of the life we were rebuilding. When I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't sure how Tom would react. I had taken the test on a whim one morning, my hands trembling as I stared at the little pink lines. When I told him later that evening, his face lit up with a mixture of surprise and joy. "We're really doing this?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. "We are," I said, and for the first time, I felt a sense of hope that wasn't tinged with fear. Pregnancy wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, endless doctor's appointments, and moments of sheer panic about the future. But Tom was by my side through it all. He read every book he could find, attended every appointment, and even set up the nursery himself, painting it a soft, calming shade of blue. When our son, Ethan, was born, something shifted in both of us. Holding him for the first time, his tiny fingers curling around mine, I felt a surge of love so powerful it left me breathless. Tom sat beside me, his eyes wet with tears, and in that moment, I saw a version of him I hadn't seen before, a man completely, unconditionally devoted to his family. Ethan became the glue that bonded us in ways I hadn't anticipated. He brought out the best in both of us, forcing us to communicate, to collaborate, to put aside our egos for the sake of something greater. Parenthood wasn't without its challenges: sleepless nights, teething tantrums, and the endless juggle of work and family, but it gave us a shared purpose, a common goal. Underscore, 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 underscore. Now, years later, as I sit in our living room watching Ethan play with his blocks, I can't help but reflect on how far we've come. The pain of the past hasn't disappeared entirely, but it no longer defines me. It's a part of our story, yes, but it's not the whole story. Tom sits beside me, his arm draped casually over the back of the couch. He catches my eye and smiles, a quiet, knowing smile that speaks of everything we've been through. I reach for his hand, and he squeezes mine gently, a silent promise that we're still in this together. Life is messy and imperfect, full of unexpected twists and turns. But it's also beautiful, in its own complicated way. And as I watch my son build a tower with his blocks, his laughter filling the room, I feel a sense of peace I never thought I'd find. We're not perfect. We never will be. But we're here, we're trying, and we're still standing. And for me, that's enough. As the years continued to pass, the sharp edges of our pain softened into something resembling wisdom. The discovery of the secret room, Evelyn, the lies. None of it disappeared, but it became part of the fabric of who we were, a thread woven into the larger tapestry of our lives. It was no longer the defining thread, though, and that made all the difference. Ethan grew, bringing a light into our home that seemed to wash away even the darkest corners. He was a curious, bright child with Tom's eyes and my stubborn streak, and every day he reminded us why we kept fighting, why we chose to stay. Parenthood brought its own challenges, but it also brought joy, the kind of joy that makes even the hardest days worthwhile. One afternoon, as I watched Ethan ride his bike down the street, his laughter ringing out into the crisp autumn air, Tom came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. His chin rested lightly on my shoulder, and I leaned into him, the warmth of his presence grounding me. "Look at him," Tom said softly. "We did that." "We did," I agreed, my voice filled with quiet wonder. He turned me gently, his hands resting on my shoulders as he looked into my eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For staying. For giving me a chance to prove myself. For giving us this life." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I smiled. "Thank you for fighting for us," I said. "For becoming the man I always hoped you could be." We stood there for a moment, holding each other as the golden light of the setting sun bathed us in its glow. The road we had traveled wasn't one I would have chosen, but it had led us here, to this life, this family, this hard-earned peace. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Life isn't about erasing the past or pretending it never happened. It's about learning from it, growing through it, and finding the strength to keep moving forward. It's about love, not the perfect, idealized version we dream of, but the messy, complicated love that endures despite everything. As I watched Ethan pedal back toward us, his face lit with triumph, I felt a surge of gratitude for the life we had rebuilt. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. Tom took my hand as Ethan raced up the driveway, his laughter filling the air. Together, we walked inside, ready to face whatever came next. Because no matter what the future held, we knew we'd face it together.